What it do, Niner gang? Welcome into the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. I am so excited to get to today's show because all of the news and rumors that we're going to tackle on today's show, they are juicy, and they're presented to you by Magic Spoon. It's tasty cereal that is also healthy for you. Per serving, you get 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and here's the best news of the day. You can get $5 off that purchase by using that link on your screen, magicspoon.com/49ers Report. Let's get into the latest 49ers news and rumors, and we kick off today's show with this. Did the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan specifically, want to trade for Matthew Stafford? I'm giving this for Shanahats, light the candlestick, because Kyle Shanahan said it himself. He wanted to go after Matthew Stafford, a guy who he's been high on since he did draft prep on him when Matthew Stafford was slinging the rock out of Georgia during the 2009 NFL Draft. Kyle Shanahan joined the Flying Coach podcast with Sean McVay and Peter Schrager. Actually reached out to Peter Schrager of NFL Network, exchanged some DMs with him, complimented him on the podcast because the conversation about quarterbacks and Matthew Stafford I thought was fascinating between McVay and Kyle Shanahan. And Shanahan said flat out, 49ers were interested in trading for Stafford. And the way it came about and almost happened was pretty wild. And as we know, at the end of the day, the Rams ended up getting in front of the 49ers and making that deal for the multi-time Pro Bowler. Here's what Shanahan had to say to Schrager and McVay about almost dealing for Stafford. That was frustrating. I remember looking through it because everybody was telling me it was a possibility. Stafford's the man. I studied him hard coming out of college, and you always play against him, so you know how good he is. But to know he might be available and to spend 2 weeks really watching him, Sean, yeah, he's really better than I realized. I remember Saturday, I was so stressed out, and finally we talked to someone. It was 7 o'clock at night, and they're like, no, nothing's happening at the earliest until tomorrow, so you can finish your night. That is Kyle Shanahan on Matthew Stafford. Your one-word reaction to that quote. Get those one-word reactions in the comment section down below, and just start flooding the chat. For me, my one-word reaction to what Shanahan had to say, almost. Because the Niners almost pulled the trigger on bringing in Matthew Stafford. And I think he's the better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's put up larger stats. He's the better passer. He's been a little bit more readily available. And when you look at his career stats, Matthew Stafford has been getting after it for a really long time. He played in 14 games last year with the Detroit Lions, completed around 64% of his passes, more than 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Those numbers were just okay, but please factor in that the Lions last year were an awful team. Over 12 seasons, though, the number's pretty stupid, and Stafford could be on his way to Canton and rock that Hall of Fame jacket at some point in the future. Throughout his career, completing a little less than 63% of his passes, which is just okay. He's thrown for more than 45,000 yards, 282 touchdowns to 144 picks, and his career record, which we have to focus on, 74-90-1. He's only led the Lions to the playoffs 3 years. He has not won a playoff game throughout his entire career, and he certainly deserves slack for that because in some of the biggest games of his career, he has failed to show up. But we know this about Detroit. It's been the same for Barry Sanders as well as Calvin Johnson. Any great player who has gone through that franchise, their careers have died. They've faltered. They've been flushed down the toilet. The Detroit Lions as a franchise, they're abysmal. They're dysfunctional. They've never been a winning organization, and Matthew Stafford's numbers certainly were affected by that, especially from a record standpoint, with him being well below 500 and him also only leading the Lions to the playoffs 3 times and winning no playoff games since getting drafted in the first round in the 2009 draft. I think this worked out for the Niners. Maybe not for this year in 2021, but they did move up in the draft to take Trey Lance, and I've said here on the channel, I am so high on Trey area. I think this dude has a boatload of upside. He has so much untapped potential. And I think the ceiling for him is just as high as it was for Matthew Stafford when he was selected out of Georgia. It would have been interesting, no doubt, if the Niners traded for Stafford for this year in 2021, because this is a Super Bowl ready roster, as I've talked about a lot. And Stafford, I think, is going to be able to put up big numbers with Sean McVay and some of the weapons on that Rams offense. But in Detroit, he just wasn't supported by a good supporting cast, really outside of Calvin Johnson. They had a couple of good wide receivers here and there, but he went through a bevy of different coaches, and there was no stability there at all. So let's play a would you rather game. This one, it's going to be appropriate because sometimes when you're drinking and you play the would you rather game, it gets a little bit sketchy. But would you rather go with Matthew Stafford? If so, type S for Stafford, or Trey Lance, type L for Trey Lance. So the 49ers Report is presented by our friends at Magic Spoon. You go to magicspoon.com/49ers Report and you get $5 off your purchase. So this is why Magic Spoon is so healthy. Let's look at the cocoa brand, for instance. The Magic Spoon brand, 13 grams of protein, 4 grams of net carbs, 0 grams of sugar per serving. It's also grain-free and gluten-free. The other crappy cocoa brand out there, yeah, it's Cocoa Puffs. We might as well say it. Only 2 grams of protein compared to 13. 30 grams of net carbs per serving compared to 4. 12 grams of sugar compared to 0. And all of the ingredients in there are awful for you. Back in college, I would crush bowls of cereal late at night, and I got really fat. I then slimmed down, and I've reintroduced cereal into my diet because of Magic Spoon. You get $5 off your order by using that link at the bottom of your screen. Next rumor we want to hit. Did the 49ers want Julio Jones, and did they almost pull the trigger on a deal for Julio? Once again, going for Shanahans, because once again, this comes from Kyle Shanahan himself. And he has a lot of power in this organization. Him and John Lynch are working to construct this roster and make a lot of deals. And once again, on the Flying Coach podcast with Sean McVay and Peter Schrager, they asked Kyle Shanahan about the Julio Jones rumors. And every team in the NFC West was in on Julio. Any team across the NFL that wasn't in on the future Hall of Famer and 7-time Pro Bowler, you're stupid. What are you doing? The 49ers certainly in the mix as well, and Shanahan went as far as to admit he wanted to acquire Julio to ensure that no other team, including the Rams and McVay, were going to land Julio. NFC West teams, they were all linked to Julio. We covered this on the channel ad nauseum, and hopefully you didn't get fatigued by it. We were just doing our job here, doing our due diligence, bringing you the latest 49ers news and rumors. So let me ask you this, faithful. Did you want the Niners to trade for Julio? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Be sure to get your votes in the comments section down below. I did want the Niners to trade for him if it came at the right price. And it turns out the Titans got him for a really affordable price, which we'll get to here in just a bit. Shanahan said this about almost trading for Julio. That's our biggest fear in Julio. It's that Sean's going to go for him. My first choice is, man, I just wish Julio would go to the AFC. He did. But if he's going to the NFC West, we've got to make sure we get him because it almost ends up being an arms race. I know the job Sean does. I know how good of a job Pete does. I know how good of a job Cliff does. And everyone's got quarterbacks. Julio would have helped everybody, but you know what it's doing to your organization for that year and the years to come. That's a really risky thing, but man, if Sean's getting him, I'm going to risk that. I know that's how he thinks. That's how we all think because you've got to compete with your division first. And I talk about the price that it took the Titans to bring in Julio to pair him up with A.J. Brown, which is going to be a lethal 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position. A second and a fourth round pick, certainly worth it. Niners didn't have first-round picks to fork over because they moved up to number 3 to take Lance. They had a second. They had a fourth. And if I'm Shanahan and Lynch, I'm making that deal to bring in Julio, especially knowing that I'm going to kind of reintroduce him to Kyle Shanahan because they worked magic in Atlanta. And at the end of the day, I'm just happy, like Shanahan said, that the Rams weren't the team that got Julio because Sean McVay, say what you want about him. I know Shanahan has had his number. He could cook up a plethora of plays to get this dude open, and he would have had the ability to torch this Niners defense, and we would have been having nightmares about Julio on the outside against this secondary. But I do think the Niners wide receiving core is in a good spot right now. I'd like to see them make one more addition, or I'd really like to see Jalen Hurts stay upright and healthy. But I think the Niners receivers in a good spot going into 2021, regardless of who the quarterback is, whether that be Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. Deebo Samuel is a stud. Brandon Ayuk has 1,000-yard potential this year. Jalen Hurts has to stay healthy, and if he does, he can be a physical specimen in the slot or on the outside. That wide receiver 4 spot, it's up for grabs between guys like Richie James, Mohamed Sanu, Travis Benjamin. We'll see what happens in training camp, but there's no doubt if you land Julio Jones, In 9 games last year, 51 receptions, 771 yards. He would have vaulted up that depth chart. He would have been the wide receiver 1. Yes, he's 32 years old. Those injuries starting to pile up. But Julio, no doubt, a future Hall of Famer. 2 more rumors to get to. Is Aaron Banks, the second-round pick, offensive guard out of Notre Dame, going to start week 1? 3 Shanahans. I'm pretty intrigued. This is something that I've talked a lot about here on the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. Because of the depth issues along the offensive line, and frankly, just because of Banks' talent, I think he's going to be penciled in as the week 1 starter at right guard. According to The Athletic, they said David Lombardi, as well as Matt Barrows, Banks likely to start at right guard, even though he's a rookie. 49ers drafted him in the 2nd round after they moved back in that trade with the Raiders to pick number 48. At the time, I really wanted the Niners to target a cornerback with that 2nd round pick. I think it was around 43 overall. A guy like Asante Samuel Jr. still on the board. I was somewhat confused by the selection of Banks, but over time, I've become more and more impressed with him as a prospect. And crazy fact, first time San Francisco has drafted an interior offensive lineman under Kyle Shanahan. And I talk about me not really being high on Banks at the time. I just didn't think he was a scheme fit. But over time, information can certainly change opinions. And over time, my opinion on Banks has changed because of what Shanahan and Mike McDaniel have said about the change in philosophy at the offensive line position. Historically, they've gone after smaller guys, but they want beefier guys up front because they have a running quarterback now in Trey Lance, and also they've dealt with a bevy of injury issues as well. Speaking of Mike McDaniel, here's what he had to say a few weeks ago during offseason workouts about Banks. We thought he was a guy who was quick enough on the second level that he could attach to defenders. He had a lot of skills. We like that he's big. He's just going to have to run fast while being big, and we felt like he was a candidate to do that. Here's why I'm high on Banks. He's a massive dude. He's a mauler. He's a masher. He'll put your ass right into the turf. He's 6'5", 325 pounds. This guy can move guys off their spots. And the durability, the production was certainly there at Notre Dame in a bunch of really big games. 31 straight starts in college, and during that span, he only gave up 2 sacks in 443 pass sets. That's really good. And if that translates to the NFL level, he's going to be able to protect either Jimmy G or Trey Lance. The 49ers offensive line, this is why Banks is going to start at right guard, because who's going to take his spot? McKivitz? He's not better than him. Guy like Daniel Brunskill can swing from tackle to maybe guard, so too can Compton and Coleman and Moore. I mean, Banks is the guy at right guard for me. So I agree with The Athletic in what they said about penciling him in as the starter from week 1. But going into 2021, Trent Williams, Laken Tomlinson, Alex Mack, you got Aaron Banks and Mike McGlinchey across the offensive line. McGlinchey's going to have to get better because he got torched at times, but because the line around him is better, I think he's due for a comeback season. So what's your confidence level in Banks if he does start at right guard from week 1? The first ever interior offensive lineman drafted by Shanny. Scale your level of confidence in him from 1 to 10. Niner Gang, if you're not subscribed to the Niners Report, what are you doing? We're trying to get to 40,000 subscribers by the time the Niners kick off week 1 of the 2021 season. So hit that red subscribe button down below or go to youtube.com/49erstv for the best 49ers coverage here on YouTube. Lastly, something that I've wanted to get to over the last couple of days, but frankly, I've been really busy with NBA stuff here at Chat Sports. Should the Niners trade for wide receiver NKeal Harry after his agent demanded a trade out of New England? Once again, 3 Shanahats, because once again, I'm very, very intrigued. I'm always a fan of taking a flyer and taking a chance on prospects who were drafted high in the first round, or in the first round at all, or high in the NFL draft, but didn't necessarily work out early in their NFL tenure. So this all comes from that report the other day of NKeal Harry's agent demanding a trade out of New England. He requested a trade, said, hey, get my client out of the Patriots, because the former first-round pick has been a massive bust so far. Has 2 years, little less than $6 million left on his contract, so he is very, very affordable. And the production so far through 2 seasons has not been good at all. But we know this about Bill Belichick and the Patriots. He has been terrible, Belichick has, at identifying and drafting receivers at the high end of the draft. Harry looks like yet another bust, and the production through his first 2 seasons, it is not good. But I think there's some potential and upside inside this prospect somewhere if he just gets an opportunity. But his first 2 seasons, 12 receptions in 2019. Yes, he dealt with a lot of injuries, but still not good for a first-round pick. Last year, not much better at 33 receptions, only 309 receiving yards last year. The quarterback situation wasn't all that good, but he could not get separation at all, and his average yards per catch, 9.5. This is a wide receiver who hasn't been able to get any separation at all, and he has just 2 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons in his rookie year as well as his second year. So 4 combined touchdowns throughout his first 2 seasons. Not good. So what do you think, Niner Gang? Would you trade for NKeal Harry? Type T for trade, type P for pass. Get your votes in the comment section right now. I would. I'd take a chance on him, and I actually think that he'd fit well on this roster because he possesses physical traits that the Niners currently don't have on this roster outside of Jalen Hurd. He's really the complete opposite of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Deebo, Ayuk, smaller in stature in terms of height, but they're girthy guys, and they are elite wide receivers at picking up yards after the catch. NKeal Harry, on the other hand, he's more of a jump ball target, a guy who you plug in the red zone, and he can rise up, he can catch the football, but also he's just a big body that reminds me a little bit of Alshon Jeffrey. He's not going to have blazing speed. He's not going to create a lot of separation, but when it comes to contested catches, that is when he is at his best. And where would he factor into this receiving core? If Jalen Hurd can't stay healthy, NKeal Harry is a very similar player. I think Hurd's a little bit faster in terms of game speed, but if Hurd gets injured once again, why not Harry over the next 2 years at less than $6 million? I'm taking a chance on him for sure, and I think because of his skill set and because he has a different blend than an Ayuk or a Samuel, Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to make NKeal Harry work. We're talking about an offensive wizard here who's been able to develop wide receivers. Bill Belichick has not been able to do that. Shanahan has. That's why I'm going after Harry for the right price, especially if it only takes a 4th-round pick or something in that range.